In Chicago, I was doing folk and what we called country rock back then, which would now be called Americana, and and also, of course, it was Chicago. We're doing R&B and in there. I mean, and for some reason, R&B sessions, and I never understood this, wanted to book round the clock. So they'd book like 9 a.m. to 9 a.m., which, you know, if you're young enough and crazy enough, you can kind of get through, but it's a great way to die young. Anyway, so I remember on one of the earlier ones, I had some guys come in and, you know, 9 a.m., we're in there rigging the studio. By noon, we've got talent in the place and we're starting to track and doing 2 songs for a single. And we were, you know, building the tracks there. And by evening time, we had a string section in. This was a nice studio. One of the partners was an architect and had designed the studio with these dramatic lines and angles. And because it was the 1970s, we had walls, floor, and ceiling were all covered in really long shag carpet in bronze and russet colors. So anyway, dramatic room, but at that time, when you hired a chunk of people who were from the Chicago Symphony, they showed up ready for a concert. So we had these people trooping into this R&B session, you know, in gowns and cutaway coats and stuff, and to set up like a 12-piece string section. So anyway, they were good and quick, and you know, a little time to get that done, and then, you know, by midnight we're tracking vocals and backup vocals, and clock winds around. So, you know, 4, 5 in the morning, you know, 6 in the morning, they're saying, "Oh, do us a good rough mix. Do us a really good rough mix." Well, yeah, I'm 23, you know, I'm trying to prove my stuff, you know. So yeah, I bust my butt trying to do a really hot rough mix. And in those days, nobody was really using cassettes at all. So a rough mix in the older studios meant they'd actually cut you a record that you could go play. But we considered that kind of out of date, and those little records you cut sounded kind of lame anyway. So I would cut 7.5 inch per second reel of tape on a professional machine, so it was sounded good. So anyway, I worked hard and did these 2 rough mixes and all that stuff, and these guys were saying, "That's great, man. We'll be back as soon as the bank's open." I said, "Oh, okay." So these guys all split. "Yeah, sounds great, thanks. Yeah, you know, we'll be back as soon as the bank's open." So they're all gone, and I'm hanging out in the studio. I've been around, you know, cranking all night long, and in those days too, I'd smoked cigarettes a lot, and I was smoking unfiltered Pell-Mells, and of course by midnight I'm bumming theirs. I'm smoking Cools and stuff, and so anyway, rolls around, you know, it's 10 a.m. thinking, well, the banks are open. 11 a.m. Where are those guys? The banks have been open an hour. So, well, you guessed it. They never showed up at all. So what they probably did was they headed down to the south side, stopped somewhere, had a nice leisurely breakfast, laughed about me, and went on there, and probably went to Chess where they could get in and actually cut lacquer for a 45. Chess could also press them on site, and across the street there was a printer that did labels and whatever, you know. So a week later on WVON in Chicago, which we all listened to because it was the R&B station, WVON, I heard my rough mix. So, lesson learned. There used to be a thing called a bulk tape eraser because studios used a huge amount of tape, and radio stations in particular, and budget studios like to reuse tape. So there were these devices. Some of them looked like a rectangle, and you'd sort of pass the reel over it and it'd wipe it. Others were handheld. I found one that was about the size of a 1-pound coffee can, like a Folger can, but it was chrome, had a big handle on it and a button and a red light that went on when you hit it, because, you know, you want to watch out. You hit that button and it could wipe out all your credit cards, if any of us had those in those days. And anyway, so I took some transfer letters, which are where you rub a letter off a sheet, and on both sides of it, in the biggest letters I could find, I had tape eraser, and that became my bill collector. So the next time it's 5, 6 in the morning, I'm knocking out that hot rough mix. And I started hearing about the bank hours. I'd say, nope, nope. And I'd pull that thing out and say, it's a tape raiser. And you hit that button, it's made a noise like a dynamo. And, you know, it was terrifying. So then I'd grab that reel and buzz this thing, and man, money'd come out of hat bands and pants cuffs and socks. And all of a sudden I'd have all the dough. So that became the bill collector. Eddie has a much more sophisticated system nowadays here at the vault. But anyway, life in Chicago. Anyway, I moved from there, went down to Atlanta, and things were different.